have a number of questions I want to jump into, but first, maybe I will quickly introduce everyone here. So we have Zaki, who just joined from Iqulusion and Sommelier. We have Adrian from Heliax, Anoma, and previously Cryptium Labs. We have Felix from Chorus One, our new partner. Thanks, Felix, for basically in the chat being like, we're live. Like, I was like, oh, timing, awesome. Billy is here from the ICF, and Dave is here from Sikka and now Osmosis. Did I say that all right? Did I miss any affiliation? Let me know if I, like, feel free to jump in if there's another company I should mention there. No, did I got it? Okay. All right. So I think my first question is, so it's been 3 months since we last did a session, and we actually did a panel in that event as well. And I want to hear from you, kind of like from each of you, what is the most exciting development in Cosmos that's happened in the last 3 months? Let's start with Adrian.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the answer is pretty obvious in my opinion. IBC is live. And Osmosis has proved out the use case that IBC is like a reasonable UX that you can like actually move assets with. This was really not clear to begin with, if I'm honest, whether like IBC transfers would look in any sort of way reasonable. And I think Osmosis is really proving out that IBC works in practice. So I think over time we start seeing a lot more adoption of IBC.
Cool. All right, who wants to go next? Felix, what's new with you? Or what have you seen?
Yeah, definitely. I can just could repeat just what Adrian has said, but I'm going to also add, I think, a lot of things maturing, right? A lot of chains coming to launch in the Cosmos ecosystem, be it their Osmosis or also like Injective today. And really, I think a lot of the tooling, kind of Cosmos being used widely, Peggy Bridge coming to a lot of chains. So I think really Cosmos, really bright future and great moment right now in the ecosystem. And we're super excited to be part of this and support a lot of chains.
Zaki, what's new from your side?
All I would say is shame on Adrian for ever doubting that IBC was going to be awesome. But Osmosis definitely made the IBC dream a reality, and that has obviously been, I think, a big deal. It's been super cool to see, several thousand IBC packets moving every single day now. So like you go to Map of Zones, you see tons of activity. The Atom Osmosis trade route is alive and well, and a lot of the vision is sort of expanding the way it was always intended to. Finally. So that's kind of cool. I think all of this stuff is kind of paving the way for privacy now, because before we had IBC, our privacy solutions would just be the same as everyone else's privacy solutions, which is, privacy for the native asset inside of your chain, limited bridges, limited composability, vision. And your semantic and like the same semantic constraints that every other blockchain has, where you need a shielded pool and a non-shielded pool, and then you have to have a way to get in and out of them, and all of this stuff, and like how do you get exchanges to support all of this, and the general nightmare of privacy and blockchain integration. And I think IBC basically solves a lot of that, and we are just right at the cusp of the frontier.
Cool. All right, Dave, your project keeps getting talked about, so maybe you should weigh in.
Yeah, I mean, but for me, it's definitely the Osmosis launch. It feels almost like a cop-out answer here. Pretty stoked.
It'd be funny if you highlighted something else, but yeah.
Yeah, I think, seeing IBC go live and have this much impact, I don't know, I really got the sense that like this Cosmos dream we've been working towards for years. Like, I don't know, I feel like this is the first time it was met with like all these IBC transfers, sub-minute latency for moving things around. Beyond that, I've had a ton of fun like the last 3 months watching all the progress on Lazy Ledger and Heliax. I've been like following the repos pretty closely, and tons of cool developments going on there.
Very cool. Just a little note, Dave and I actually, with Sunny, recorded an episode of the Zero Knowledge podcast, which is coming out next week. So look for that. just so everyone kind of is ready for that. Billy, we haven't heard from you. You are sitting at the ICF. You have a slightly different perspective. I feel like you see all these other kind of maybe things coming up. What's new? What was new in the last 3 months that was very exciting?
Yeah, definitely have my hand in a lot of pots, and it's a lot of stuff that won't be really publicly visible for a long time. So it's like, I feel like I'm often working on different timescales, which can be frustrating as well. You're like, I want to see it now. I mean, even with like seeing IBC live, I've been like dying to see the sharp edges. You know what I mean? Like when you see it live, like where are the hiccups going to come? Because that's like the really exciting part of seeing that it's actually happening. But in light of this being a privacy event, I would say one of the like soon to be live features that I think has a potentially interesting application with privacy is an ICS called Interchain Accounts. It's ICS 27. So it was the first one that was basically merged after ICS 20, which is a token transfer. This is the application level standard for IBC. The IBC is agnostic to the contents of the packets, but inside of those packets, if you write standards, then it becomes easy to parse on both sides. And ICS 27 Interchain Accounts basically allows you to send a packet across IBC that is executed on the receiving chain as if it was a normal account who's executing a normal message. And so depending on exactly how it's crafted on the sending side, you can basically create like contract-based accounts. So you could have an entire blockchain basically control an account collectively on a different blockchain, the way a smart contract can interact with other smart contracts on Ethereum. And it opens up a lot of possible applications. One of them is like staking derivatives. One of them is sort of like, group management of funds. You could imagine like the community pool is a DAO that controls funds collectively, and they use those things in different DeFi operations. Maybe they use them to collectively stake. You have sort of like business development between blockchains. You could do a token swap between community pools. Each of them delegate tokens on each other's validators. There's lots of sort of cool stuff there. But in terms of privacy, I think also sort of like an interesting feature of IBC is the fact that you could have basically a private blockchain that's being run with its own internal rules and things like that. It doesn't need to use cryptography to be private. It could just be privately run from a few nodes who only know about the existence of each other. They could come to sort of terms. They could be, relatively, they don't have to trust each other in the same sense. They have a use for a blockchain, but they can still sort of collectively manage assets on a remote public blockchain. And the only aspect of that public blockchain that they can see are the IBC packets that come through. So actually who's managing that system, what is the composition of it, that can be completely private, not through cryptography, just because it's maintained on private servers that they have traditional access control with, and they only expose those IBC packets that interact in interesting ways on remote blockchains.
What kind of project, like I'm trying to understand from what you described there, like what projects would use that? Is that, what kind of thing?
Currencies.
Which one?
Central bank currencies is like, I think one of the obvious cases there. Right,
okay.
Like no central bank is ever going to give up monetary sovereignty to like the ETH2 validator set or to any other validator set. So I think honestly the way to get central bank currencies into these systems is to allow them to expose proof of authority chains, IBC connectors effectively, via which they can issue and redeem in and out of the assets.
You could also imagine sort of like a private DAO. So it's, a bunch of people who have enough trust to put their money together, but they want to have strict accounting with like a Byzantine fault-tolerant system and state machine with accountability. But they also don't want their inner workings to be visible to the larger public.
Companies issuing shares, I think, is another one actually. Or like tokenizing, even like things like tokenizing supply chains, right? Like Volkswagen isn't going to run on Ethereum. They're like going to issue car NFTs. And then they can flow around the ecosystem. If you actually want to get a car in exchange, you can go back to the Volkswagen IBC connector.
I'm trying to, so you mentioned the ICS 27, so that's a standard, but is there tooling that would need to be built for this? Or would you expect the teams that are interested in building this to build all of it?
So the way ICS module works is there's like a core module that's able to basically process these messages, produce them for outgoing, and also receive them incoming and process them. So that's like the first layer that is sort of just supplied out of the box inside the Cosmos SDK for, it's part of the IBC team's sort of work that we're doing here in Interchain. And then you would have a secondary module, which actually has like logic about under what conditions can you produce outgoing transactions. And that's where, you might have really customized stuff for your own project. Like you might actually put in some custom engineering about, I want these conditions before the blockchain is willing to produce an outgoing message on behalf of all of us. By default, and the other module that we're planning on producing as part of this is to utilize the governance module. So you'd be able to go to the governance module, say, hey, I've got a message that I think we should execute on the Cosmos Hub. It's a sale of the tokens that we have there for this other token set. I submit that message to the governance module. The token holders on this local chain will vote. Should we execute this message? Yes, no. If it gets voted yes, it gets handed off to the ICS interchain account module, which converts that into an IBC packet that's ready to be relayed. So then anybody can take the contents of that packet and submit it to the Cosmos Hub. It goes to the interchain account there. It says, oh yeah, I know about the connection to that blockchain. I know that it controls this account. And here's a message that it says it wants to execute on behalf of that account, which is directed at the DEX, for instance, or whatever it is that it's directed at the very end.
Cool. All right, next kind of direction I want to take. So out of the 5 of you, 4 of you are validators or were validators. In the case of Adrian, you were a validator. One of the things I wanted to ask here is, what is the role of a validator on the Cosmos Hub in the Cosmos ecosystem? And I'm wondering if that's changed in any way as IBC has sort of like unlocked the zones and connected all of it up. And I don't know if you have thoughts on this, but yeah.
It just opens up the software stack that you have to run, right? And like the ways you can help the ecosystem grow over time, I think. I mean, as a validator, I think you are focused generally on proof of stake. So you're running multiple chains, not specific to Cosmos ecosystem, actually. And I think now with IBC, you're also just going to be running multiple relayers that like bridge between different chains, whether it be near to Cosmos, near to Osmosis, Osmosis to Cosmos, whatever, right? I think one of the underexplored aspects though of this is that validators will also make very good market makers over time, especially if you're relaying lots of data, because you're going to see a lot of the arbitrage opportunities on the different chains. You're probably going to have accounts on different chains. And I think like if I was a validator right now, this is probably the future direction I take my validator in, which is arbitrage across chains.
Wow. That's exciting.
That feels similar to like, miners should all be front running, where like, as a miner, you have this capability, but then like, should you execute it? And it seems right now that miners don't, just because on Ethereum or weren't, maybe they are now, just because they were lazy or didn't know have the generalized front running bots.
So honestly, this feels different though. So I mean, because you and me, we are biased here. We're going to solve front running on like single chains pretty soon, especially once built on Tendermint. But like, I don't think that validators. I don't think we should call it front running if you like supply liquidity in like if you keep the Osmosis AMM stable in relation to like Coinbase or a DEX or Uniswap and Ethereum, right? This is what I mean, that you have a lot of pricing opportunities because you're watching and running all these chains anyway.
You meant like take ARB opportunities or like, take liquidation.
Yeah.
There's a compound chain.
There's going to be like, you should, I think we should assume that there's going to be a trading venue of some kind on every Cosmos chain. That there was going to be opportunity, that there's going to be price distortions between them. And I mean, it's just like, this is the world that we're seeing. Like Ethereum is going to have an AMM on every roll up, right? Every roll up will have an AMM. And so now you have some sort of, and then there's the true like heterogeneous world of L1s. Then you have like these ecosystems like, the Substrate ecosystem, the Substrate ecosystem, the Cosmos ecosystem, the Avalanche ecosystem, the Ethereum rollup ecosystems that are all like very similar into their structure. And so like, there's just going to be like this pervasive need to constantly be arbing the markets between them to ensure financial stability. But like, this goes to like my general thesis, which is like, if you are running a validator, like you have two directions that you can go. You can either be a capital deployer or a protocol developer, or all three if you really don't want to sleep ever.
So
all three, you're running into tons of conflicts of interest. Dev, you may experience this relatively soon, and I guess Zaki as well.
Oh, absolutely. I'm very familiar with these conflicts of interest. I don't think we will be running a validator on Sommelier, for instance.
Yeah, similar to we're not running a validator on Osmosis.
We had exactly the same.
I want to bring, continuing on that question of the role of the validator is in our case, I sort of forgot to mention me in this group. I mentioned there was 4 out of 5, there's actually 5 out of 6. But is there a role for, granted what we're trying to do, which is also push for some ideas, potentially build in certain directions. Is that still something that you think validators should be taking a role on?
Absolutely, especially with how governance is structured in the Cosmos ecosystem. I think it's not so fundamental to abstract staking. But I think for the concrete staking in Cosmos, where when I stake to you, I don't just delegate money for securing the network. I also delegate my governance vote. And in that regard, this is then critical. The governance opinions of validators at the moment are very important. I do think we can imagine a world in which we separate the governance rights from the staking rights and you get rewarded separately. That's not the world we live in right now. So until that happens, pushing for governance change, I think is an important part of being a validator.
Yeah, I was going to say, from a user perspective, I'm mostly the person who's looking at the list of validators and definitely selecting the worst qualified one. Whoever's got the lowest commission rate, whoever has the flashiest picture, whoever has a brand familiarity, or whoever I'm familiar with the person doing it. And all of that is a combination of politics and Hollywood marketing. You know what I mean? I think that's actually an aspect of validators that we're going to see a lot more. Additional services, not exactly in the way I think it's mostly been spoken about, but more airdrops and access to group chats. And I think that, I would expect that validators should want to have actually a much closer relationship to their delegators, whether it's updates, chat, being able to send notifications, hey guys, thanks so much for your loyalty. All of this sort of stuff will only increase the delegations and increase the power, which if, that leads to a better profit margin, it seems inevitable.
It's interesting, right, though, that Sikka was one of the pioneers in this, right? The having really good relationship with their delegators. But you've run into the inevitable tensions, which is hey, we want to build a protocol now. And so again, you don't have as much time to be and resources to put to that. There isn't building a standardized toolkit for a toolkit for, validator, delegator interactions and stuff like that are all things that are still TBD to be, for the most part, the stuff needs to be built. I've wanted to build it, but haven't had the time. And I think we run into this general situation of generally not having enough time and all of those trade-offs.
I wonder if the tipping point will be staking derivatives, at least on the short-term version of it, in which you would have, a staking derivative attached to an actual validator. And so, the identity of that validator becomes, an economic pressure as well for the fact that you're trying to have the highest valued one in different ways, or if we're going to see that most derivatives are essentially priced the same regardless of the validator.
I would expect the latter, that most derivatives are priced roughly the same. Actually, wait, there's a caveat to this. I think most derivatives for public validators that are sort of similar, sort of Sikka, Chorus One, Iqulusion, Figment, Staked, whatever, right? They will be priced similar to each other. The randoms won't.
I think it also depends, if you're going back to this MEV discussion in a way, if the validator is doing these arbitrages or whatever, if you can give back to his delegators, I guess it might also impact pricing of his staking derivative or something. I think that's also where the loyalty thing comes in, and could be a very interesting dynamic. I definitely tend to agree that the actual role of the validator becomes in this current ecosystem much more like financial in a way, where it's not just about kind of DevOps anymore, but more like, okay, how you understand what's happening in this DeFi on these chains, and can you use it, but maybe like also you have like this powerful position. Do you exploit it? Do you not? I think the validator also has more like social responsibility than kind of the proof of work miner, who no one cares about. Like the validator is more public facing, will have like content, will have like a Twitter account, and then people can like call them out, and also like unstake if they see them kind of being detrimental to the network or trying to do things that maybe you have a harder time like kind of forbidding miners to do. So I think it's a really interesting dynamic.
There is some super linearity still in Cosmos to like rewards, which I think also relates to your point about if they're doing arbitrages or liquidations, and they do some kickback to their delegators. So like currently we actually still have this in Cosmos where like the proposer of a block gets a larger percent of the reward, right? And then so if I have a higher staking power, I propose more often, I get more reward than everyone else, than like other validators. And so I don't know if we've seen like this impact delegator decisions, because that would be kind of a similar effect to the kickbacks or liquidation. It might be no one knows about this. So
yeah, I think right now, I mean, maybe it's not big enough, right? The money you're making from this on Cosmos, but we're like kind of soon probably entering this moment where it will become more valuable as there is like AMMs and all these DeFi applications. So
I honestly think that validators are not really going to compete on price. I mean, like all validators will return the same amount of money, so within a narrow band of fees, probably from 5 to 15% or so. And whether you pick 5 or 15 probably actually doesn't impact your delegation amounts all that much. Like what we discovered, for example, with Cryptium, is that most people like cared about like our stances in the ecosystem much more so than our fees. This doesn't apply for the small holders that are very loud on Reddit and Twitter, but for the large capital deployment into validators, this is where they didn't care whether it was 5 or 15% fees effectively. They cared like what stances you're taking in the ecosystem.
Do you I want to kind of bring it back to privacy and the role of validators. Like what could validators do to promote or push for privacy? Is there anything, I mean, this is our, big question to ourselves constantly, but like, are there things that you could start to incorporate into like the validator's role that actually could push some of this tech forward?
To Zaki's point earlier, at least in the Cosmos Hub, a lot of the early validators were people who work in the protocol, and there's something, feedback loop where a lot of validators end up being like protocol developers. So that's one way. The second way is also just trying to market to build the meme of privacy is this important thing in the telegrams, convincing all these voter rights. This is what popped to mind. I don't know if there's.
I think one of the biggest questions is really going to be as privacy-enabled technologies that require validators start to pop up, like how is the reputational aspect of being a validator on them going to work? I don't think any of us wants to be like a validator on like the money laundering blockchain, right? And so legitimizing privacy as an important function that a validator provides as part of their overall service portfolio, I think is a really important thing, and like why I've been such a supporter of ZK Validator, because ZK Validator brings a lot of like brand positivity and like this is advancing cryptography and science aspect of privacy to the sort of privacy space, and these events, all of these things really help us push an impression of running a validator on a privacy blockchain as like really furthering these causes rather than like providing a convenient way to launder money.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with this.
This is an issue of all privacy tech too. Like this is we constantly, ebb in and out of these conversations. And I think, as a validator is a very public facing entity, obviously I don't think anyone here would want to be part of something that isn't good. And at the same time, in our case, we are extremely focused on privacy. And so this is sort of a dilemma that I'd say so far have not faced, but could.
I think long term, it'd be very helpful if validators start pushing very much the narrative of financial privacy is an important fundamental human right? And sort of that they come out strong out of the gate saying that this is why we support these privacy endeavors on chains. I think we should very much shift the conversation away from money laundering towards this helps people in oppressed parts of the country, of the world or country, to be safe from government persecution, right?
It also makes the markets safer, right? Like what Anoma is building, and the threshold decryption stuff and all of this stuff. It makes markets less vulnerable to and provides consumer protection.
Yeah.
So there's a definite consumer protection angle to all of this. The other thing that I thought was an interesting dynamic in Cosmos is I would say that the political role of validators in the hub sort of peaked in 2020 when sort of Cosmos politics was in peak chaos, and has declined into 2021 as the sort of political institutions of Cosmos have sort of solidified again.
Something that's kind of disappointed me since even the current early inception of the hub is how little impact I feel like validators or governance directly has on the direction the protocol is taking. We've never voted on we've voted once or twice, but it's never been a big deal for where governance votes, I want this feature in the next upgrade. It's been more so a Cosmos Hub development team, or used to be IV, now it's this collective says, here's this new upgrade hash. You should.
This is not true. Sikka is deeply opposed to the gravity decks coming to the hub.
Yeah, but that's the recent thing, right? But historically, I feel
it's part of the hub readiness checklist now. Every feature goes to the hub to confirm, even at early stages, hey, we're going to continue working on this feature because we think it belongs on the hub. Do you guys agree with that? I mean, it's a little bit harder to wait for
validators. Do you think any of the exchange validators are happy about bringing the gravity bridge to the hub? No. It's only the overwhelming interest from atom holders that is a reason to keep putting in all this effort.
Can I ask a question?
Part of the checklist.
Sorry.
I didn't realize it's part of the checklist to get voted in. That's actually extremely exciting.
Can I ask a question about validators and privacy really quick, which is maybe just an extension of this? I feel like I've seen demos or grant applicants from before I got into the ICF that were related to plausible deniability of the operation of the validator itself. Validators are in some ways the most precarious point of a network that may be deemed illegal or something like that. They often are public legal entities that could have cease and desist or takedowns depending on their jurisdiction. But certainly there's techniques. I'd be curious if anybody knows what the status of them are for running a validator completely anonymously, or in a way that you could be public, but not proven to have produced any of the blocks. I know there's this problem of you need to be public and sort of why would I delegate to this sketchy validator, but there's also certainly a gray area between.
I mean, an interesting thought could be, can you participate in consensus where it's unprovable whether you have participated, but you're still slashable? This seems very hard and maybe impossible. Though.
You need there's a cryptographic frontier system. I forget it. The name is slipping my mind right now. But basically, it requires cryptography that we don't have yet, in order to have slashable, accountable, but consensus protocols.
Yeah.
You get rid of flashing. If you don't have flashing, it's trivial to do an anonymous proof of stake.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a question
just as a point here, you should have slashing. Non-slashable systems are probably long-term unsafe.
Oh, is it functional encryption? That's what we need?
Yes.
I believe it's what it is.
I'm trying to remember if you can do it with functional encryption or you need indistinguishability obfuscation.
Well, these are pretty related in constructions.
So, I mean, generally on the point of validator privacy, I actually think it's like not a long-term concern that I particularly hold for these ecosystems. I think it matters much more how geographically distributed your validators are. And generally speaking, these are small entities. Like they're not like massive failure points like one large exchange. And so taking a lot of validators down at the same time is very hard. And what we've seen from these exchanges, which at the moment everyone is using to like wash their coins, is that even centralized exchanges run out of shady jurisdictions are incredibly hard to take down.
Yeah,
I
think the biggest...
I would expect you to come after the fiat off-ramps much before they try to come after the protocols themselves.
Yeah, going after validators, because if like it becomes too difficult to run Iqulusion, we just like unbond all our coins and move on, right? Do other things.
Well, I think one thought here, and it doesn't exactly solve what you described, Billy, but I know that like Henry, who is in the chat, has been actually doing work on, I don't think it's privacy for validators, but I believe it's privacy for the delegators to the validators. And yeah, Henry, if you wanna say anything there, just to clarify that. Yeah, so I mean, I don't know if also looked on the validator side, if you've actually like explored what it would be to be a privately validating, but definitely somebody to be in touch with around that rough area. And actually, I think it's the only project that I've seen that's really dealing with it. And this is Penumbra.
I mean, there's another question of like, does it suffice to have kind of bandwidth privacy where I have some anon identity, but then no one can locate my servers or find the person behind it? But also, I found this is historically pretty hard to like run a very live server that no one can trace. I mean, so maybe with NIM this might get fixed, but I'm not. I don't know. It's like I think it's a very hard side of like maybe one of the hardest like network anonymity cases to handle.
All right, so I think we have about 10 minutes left in our session. And I have a question about Osmosis, going back to Dave's project. And the question here is, like, what does Osmosis do to the Cosmos ecosystem? Like, what does it mean for the way that all of these things are running? And I feel like there might be slightly different opinions in this panel here. Like, basically the question here is like, how does Osmosis being live change, or what does it do to the role of the Cosmos Hub itself? So I hope I didn't say that too controversially.
Yeah. Okay, so I will say that basically my expectation has been that the life cycle of Cosmos zones is going to fundamentally change because of the emergence of IBC connected DEXs. Because like if you kind of look at like what was the life cycle of a Cosmos zone was, you like go out, you start like a Cayman Foundation, you sell tokens to investors and validators. You get a network up, you go to an exchange, you try and get that exchange to list you. Then your token has some liquidity. Then you have like community events and marketing and Telegram groups and all of this stuff. And this was like the original way of doing things. And now the way of doing things is going to be like, I get together with it. I get like a small number of validators, 2, 3, 4 validators. I get a Cosmos zone. I get a zone up. I connect to the DEXs on the hub and Osmosis. I maybe make a community proposal to spend some community funds on incentivizing an Osmosis pool. I immediately get liquidity, start building a community of users and validators. My validator set grows organically over time as value accrues to the token. And like all of this like heavyweight stuff that like people used to complain about Cosmos suddenly goes away. And it's all unlocked by having a DEX connected over IBC.
What does this mean for the hub and like?
Yeah, I mean, this is very true. This is like reducing massively the burden of launching new independent chains that connect over IBC, right? But I also think the more interesting thing will be or not the more interesting thing, but a different thing is going to be how the sort of topology of IBC connections evolves. So currently we're seeing this only, I mean, Map of Zones is great for this. Currently we're only seeing this really with like things built with the Cosmos SDK. But here we're already seeing it's not like a hierarchical connection, right? Where things connect to each other much more fluidly rather than all go via a central hub. It'd be interesting to see what happens as soon as like there's an IBC connection going on to NEAR, whether that flows only through the hub or that flows into the hub and Osmosis and region maybe, and like how this is going to structure. I think this is going to be the most interesting. To me, this is the most interesting thing, like how this topology of IBC connectors evolves.
I'm also kind of dubious if we're going to get this hub and spoke model organically playing out unless there's like thousands of chains. I'm not really seeing how it's going to happen.
I think the spoke model makes a lot of sense for a lot of smaller things. Like if you have like Ethereum style smart contract chains, kind of like they will need a hub and they're the spokes to this. But I think all major chains, it's not necessarily going to be this hub and spoke model at a global scale.
Famous chains. I use the term famous and non-famous chains, which is I think a much better model. And a much better way of thinking about interchain protocols. Like IBC is a protocol that's designed to work in both famous and non-famous chains. Other people are building protocols that are really only designed to work between famous chains. But I will say that like you're already seeing right now, Atom's really doing the job of providing the liquidity injection into the ecosystem that everything else needs. Like that's why the Atom Osmosis trade route is so valuable, and why the Osmo Atom pool is so valuable. And like at very least, Atoms are supposed to do that. I think every other functionality that Atoms provides, there's going to be lots of competition. You know, like the hub will have a DEX, but you will have Osmosis, and you will have numerous other DEXs. And you will have a bridge, but you will have lots of other bridges to various chains that don't natively support IBC. And as people get native IBC support, flat topologies will dominate because that's the way these things should be. So on one hand, I feel like Atoms are really doing their job. They're doing the job that we worked really hard to be, to get Atoms out there early, to have a lot of regulatory clarity around, the Atoms so that exchanges could freely list them. And, there could be many on-ramps and off-ramps to Atoms, and they seem to be doing their job.
What is the status of the Gravity DEX, and will that change something?
The hub version of the version of the hub software with the Gravity DEX was released, I think yesterday or Monday.
Oh.
Yeah, Monday.
Oh, amazing.
It's been the last couple of days have been really busy and blurry. I put up the governance proposal to adopt and upgrade on Monday as well, and we are currently voting on it. So please vote. Cool.
Is there any predictions on what this will mean for the hub? I mean, is there a goal with this that maybe can be articulated?
Go on, Zaki. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I mean, in my mind, whether there's like a goal or what does it mean is sort of the wrong question to ask. It's more that I think it's cool to see tons of experimentation. And I think right now the focus should be like, we've covered so little of the space we can be occupying here. And like, this isn't that it's either Osmosis or the Gravity DEX or some other thing. We should very much think about this. There's so much unexplored space, and we should try to occupy as much of the unexplored space as possible and not try to like fuck each other.
I do think that as a practical matter, one is that a DEX in the IBC network is an essential service. And so it certainly would be bad for the Cosmos ecosystem if there wasn't only one. And I do think when you get down to an essential service in the IBC ecosystem, my belief is the hub should have that in its protocol. That doesn't mean there shouldn't be other competing learns. It just simply means the hub should provide all the essential services of the IBC network as much as possible.
The DEXs themselves also have different features. They're sort of like better suited for different specific use cases. There's certainly lots of overlap, but like,
and that's like totally divergent roadmaps. Like,
yeah.
The Gravity DEX is going down the Uniswap v3 concentrated liquidity route role, and the Osmosis is much more focused on MEV protection. Like, I don't really see like threshold decryption coming to the hub anytime soon. But
very different approaches to MEV. I mean, the hub has batch transactions, so there's already MEV resistance within that on the AMM. And I guess, what's the timeline for threshold decryption on Osmosis? Because until then, you guys are front running.
Front run a bull. Well, as is batch things. Timeline threshold decryption, I'm not entirely sure yet. We're actually working with Heliax pretty closely on this. I don't know. Hopefully by the end of the year. I think that's possible.
I mean, the protocols, like, because we're also deploying them into Anoma, right?
Yeah.
So we are looking to launch with full front-running protection, MEV protection, so as soon as possible. But the crypto is pretty much worked. It's not upgrading Tendermint at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see. But end of the year is pretty good bet.
yeah, ABCI++ is very exciting.
I think one thing that's exciting about having two DEXs is now we get this cross-chain ARB that Adrian was talking about earlier. I mean, Sikka has famously has a stance that we don't think Gravity DEX on the hub is the move, but given that's the world we're living in, I think it is going to be exciting to see this ARB opportunity play out. Like, our validators are going to step up for this role of using their lower latency to make this happen.
Absolutely.
Another good thing I think about having the Gravity DEX is it put a gun to Osmosis's head to launch and launch fast.
Yeah.
That is very true.
Cool. So
I have a question, actually.
yeah, go ahead.
Just generally, what do you think is going to be the first live chain that adopts IBC? As in, like, not built on the SDK.
The famous,
like
the famous chain.
The first non-SDK chain. But I really hope it's not.
I would say that in general, substrate stuff is like the most staffed at this point of everything, right? There's a lot of work around various variants of Istanbul BFT, like doing a Celo IBC bridge is actually also a modest amount of work. Oasis was just talking about how they're gonna, and they're not Cosmos SDK, but they are Tendermint. So.
It's probably either going to be near in my mind or someone coming out of the.
But is like anyone? I don't think anyone at near is working on it. They have other stuff to work on.
But I think it's going to change because now there's liquidity and actually things are happening.
Felix, you have to drop off, but I actually wanted to ask you.
Yeah. I can stay on for another question for sure.
So
and I'm saying
Celo
will be first as we are working on this.
Yeah. Wait, what is it? Say it again.
Celo, as we are working on it, I have.
Okay.
Oh yeah, you guys are working on it.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
Very cool.
Yeah.
There's too much going on. Like, I knew this. I spoke at the Celo conference, right?
Yeah.
That's exciting. Well, listen, I mean, we're at time. Felix, I know you have to jump. Thank you all for this awesome panel check-in, helping us to kind of go through what's happened over the last few months. We have added links in the chat to the feedback form, which we need for our report, as well as the ZK Hackathon survey, in case it might be something interesting for you, or you want us to do it virtual. That's kind of what we're trying to figure it out. But yeah, please do fill those out, and I hope to see you at the next Privacy and Cosmos event from the ZK Validator.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Cool.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.